Homeless woman knocked on a billionaire's door. What she asked changed everything. The night was cold and the road leading to the mansion was too quiet for a place so rich. Tall iron gates stood like a wall between two worlds. On one side, warm lights trimmed hedges in silence. On the other, a woman with trembling hands and worn shoes stood under a street lamp that flickered like it might give up at any moment. Her name was Mara. She pulled her thin coat tighter around her body. It was not enough. It never was. Her hair was messy, tied back with a broken band. Her face was pale, marked by sleepless nights and hunger. Still, her eyes were steady. Scared, yes, but steady. Mara looked up at the mansion again. She had walked for nearly an hour to get here. Every step felt heavier than the last. More than once, she almost turned back. A homeless woman did not belong in a place like this. She knew that. Everyone had made sure she knew that for a long time. But tonight, turning back was not an option. She reached the gate and pressed the call button with a shaking finger. A soft buzz answered. The gate slowly opened, smooth and silent. Mara swallowed hard and stepped inside. The driveway felt endless. Gravel crunched under her shoes, the sound too loud in the quiet night. Cameras followed her. She could feel them. Her heart beat fast, but she kept walking. At last, she stood before the front door. It was huge, dark wood, polished metal handle. Everything about it said power control distance. Mara raised her hand. It hovered in the air. Her fingers shook so badly she had to clench them into a fist. She closed her eyes for 1 second and took a breath. Her chest hurt, not from the cold, from fear. What if he laughs? What if he sends security? What if he doesn't even listen? She thought of why she came, of the promise she made to herself, of the one thing she could not lose again. Mara knocked. The sound was soft, almost swallowed by the thick door. She knocked again, harder this time. The echo rang through her bones. She waited. Seconds stretched. Her legs felt weak. She pressed her hands together to stop them from shaking. Footsteps came from inside. Mara's breath caught. The door opened. Warm light spilled out, bright and unreal. A man stood there, tall, calm, dressed in simple but expensive clothes. His hair was neat, his face unreadable. This was Julian Cross, the billionaire whose name filled business news and magazine covers, the man people called untouchable. His eyes moved over her slowly, not cruel, not kind, just careful. Yes, he asked. Mara's throat tightened. For a moment, no words came out. She felt small, dirty, exposed. Then she spoke. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I know I shouldn't be here, but I need to ask you something. And if I don't ask tonight, I never will." Julian did not close the door. He waited. And in that moment, standing under the light of a life she had never known, Mara realized that everything, her past, his future, and a choice that could change them both, was about to begin. What would you do if the person knocking on your door carried a request that could change your life forever? Mara had not always been the woman standing at a billionaire's door with shaking hands. Once she had been the kind of person who woke up early, packed a lunch, and hurried to a normal job. She had been tired in the ordinary way. She had complained about small things like traffic and late bills. She had believed that if she worked hard and stayed kind, life would stay stable. That belief broke slowly then, all at once. 7 years earlier, Mara lived in a small apartment above a bakery on the east side of the city. The place smelled like warm bread in the mornings. The landlord was strict but fair. She worked as an assistant at a dental clinic. It was not a dream job, but it paid enough. She was proud of that. Her husband, Evan, drove a delivery truck for a hardware company. He was the loud laugh in the room, the person who talked to strangers like they were friends. He came home with grease on his hands and stories from the road. When he hugged her, he hugged like he meant it. They were not rich, but they were okay. Then Mara got pregnant. She remembered the day she told him. Evan lifted her off the ground and spun her around their tiny kitchen. He cried, then tried to hide it. He kept saying, We're going to be a family. A real family. Mara had laughed and said, "We already are." Their daughter Lila was born in early spring. She was small with dark hair and quiet eyes. Mara stayed up at night watching her breathe, afraid of how much she loved her. Evan would sit beside them and whisper, "She's perfect." For a while, Mara's world felt full. Then one evening, Evan did not come home. At first, Mara told herself he was late. A traffic jam, a flat tire, a coworker needing help. She texted him. No reply. She called, straight to voicemail. She waited. She kept checking the clock, like staring at it could bring him back. When the phone finally rang, it was a number she did not know. A police officer spoke in a careful voice. He asked if she was Mara Hollis. He asked if Evan Hollis was her husband. Her knees went weak before the officer even finished his sentence. There had been an accident on the highway. A truck swerved. Evan's vehicle had flipped. The officer said Evan had died at the scene. Mara did not remember screaming, but her neighbor later told her she did. Mara only remembered the feeling of the floor under her hands, like she was holding on to it to keep from falling into nothing. After that, life became a blur of grief and small tasks. Funeral paperwork, insurance calls, condolences from people who did not know what to say. Mara stared at Lila's tiny face and tried to be strong. She told herself, "I have to live for her." But grief was not the only thing waiting for her. Bills started piling up. Evan's income was gone. The insurance payout was smaller than she expected, swallowed by hospital costs, funeral fees, and old debt they had never fully cleared. Mara tried to work again, but childcare was expensive. She took extra shifts and still came up short. One month she paid rent late. The landlord gave a warning. The next month she paid even later. Another warning. By the third month, the landlord was no longer patient. Mara begged. She promised she would catch up. She offered to clean the building's stairwell. She offered anything. The landlord shook his head and said, "It's business, Mara." "I'm sorry." She was evicted on a rainy Thursday. Mara packed everything she could into 2 suitcases and a couple of bags. She held Lila on her hip and tried to keep her voice calm. She told her baby, "It's okay. It's just for a little while." She believed it when she said it. For the first week, she stayed with a co-worker in a cramped living room. The co-worker was kind but uncomfortable. Her boyfriend complained about noise, about space, about how long this was going to last. Mara tried not to take it personally. She cooked. She cleaned. She stayed quiet. On the 10th day, the coworker said, "Mara, I'm so sorry. We can't do this anymore." Mara nodded like she understood because she had no other choice. She tried shelters next. Some were full. Some had rules she couldn't follow because of Lila's age. Some were unsafe. One night she heard shouting in a hallway and locked herself in a bathroom stall with her daughter until morning. After weeks of moving from place to place, Mara stopped calling it temporary. She started calling it what it was: homeless. What made it worse was how quickly the world stopped seeing her as a person. People looked through her, past her, like she was part of the sidewalk. If she asked for help, some people ignored her. Some people stared like she was a problem. Once a man tossed coins at her without looking up, like feeding a stray animal. Mara would swallow her pride and pick up the coins anyway, because pride did not buy food. Pride did not keep her daughter warm. She learned survival fast. She learned which public bathrooms were clean enough to wash up, which cafes threw out pastries at closing time, which parks had lights and security cameras because darkness was dangerous. She learned to sleep lightly, always listening. A simple backpack became her most valuable thing. She never let it out of reach. She did not drink. She did not use drugs. She did not choose this life. But strangers didn't care about details. They preferred simple stories that made them feel safe. She must have done something wrong, they thought. The hardest part wasn't the hunger. It wasn't even the cold. It was Lila. Mara tried to keep her daughter clean and smiling, but kids noticed everything. Lila asked questions. Why don't we have a home? Mara would force a smile. We're just traveling, sweetheart. Why do you cry at night? Mara would wipe her face quickly. It's just the wind. My eyes are tired. Lila grew older, and the questions grew sharper. One day when Lila was sick, she said in a small voice, Mom, am I bad? Did we lose our house because of me? Mara felt like someone stabbed her. No, Mara said fast, pulling her close. Never. You are the best thing in my whole life. This is not your fault. Nothing about you is wrong. Lila pressed her face into Mara's coat and whispered, Then why don't people like us? Mara had no good answer. She only hugged her tighter. For years, Mara fought like this. Day after day, she tried programs, job centers, temporary work. Sometimes things improved for a moment. Then something knocked them down again. An illness, a stolen bag, a missed appointment, a system that moved too slowly. Then a few months before the night at the mansion, the real crisis came. Leela got sick. At first it was a cough and a fever. Mara thought it was a cold. She found a free clinic and waited in line for hours. The doctor gave basic medicine and said, keep her warm. Watch her breathing. But Mara couldn't keep her warm enough. Nights were cold. The cough worsened. Lila's breathing became shallow. Her lips turned pale. One night, Mara held her daughter and realized Lila was shaking too hard. Mara ran. She ran into a hospital and begged at the front desk. Her voice cracked as she said, Please. She can't breathe right. Please help my baby. They did help. They put Lila on oxygen. They ran tests. They said the words pneumonia and risk. Mara sat in a plastic chair by the bed holding Lila's small hand, feeling helpless and furious at the world. A social worker visited the next day. She was polite, but her eyes were tired. She said we can treat her, but after discharge, she needs stable housing, clean air, warmth, follow-up care. Mara nodded quickly. Yes, yes, I'll do that. I'll find a place. The social worker hesitated, then said softly, If you can't, child services may get involved. Mara felt the blood drain from her face. What do you mean? Mara asked, even though she knew. It means, the woman said gently, they might say you're unable to provide a safe environment. Mara stood up so fast the chair scraped the floor. No, she said. No, please. I'm her mother. I'm trying. I'm trying so hard. The social worker's expression did not change much. She had heard this before. She said, I'm not your enemy, Mara. I'm warning you so you understand what's at stake. After that, Mara couldn't sleep at all. Her worst fear was not being hungry, not freezing, not being ignored. Her worst fear was losing Lila, because if the system took her daughter, Mara knew she might never get her back. She had seen other mothers disappear from their children's lives like smoke, and she knew what that did to a child. Mara left the hospital with Lila a few days later, holding a paper bag of medicine and a long list of instructions she didn't know how to follow. That same week, Mara heard a story in a shelter line. A woman said there was a billionaire in the city, Julian Cross, who had quietly funded a youth education program years ago. Not a big press thing, just something he did. The rumor was that he once paid for a stranger's surgery after seeing a photo in the news. Most people laughed at the idea of asking him for anything. He doesn't care, someone said. They never care. But Mara couldn't let it go. She started looking for details. She used the library computers when she could. She searched his name, his company, his address. It took days, but she found the location of his main residence hidden behind high walls in the richest part of town. At first, she told herself it was impossible. Then she thought of the social worker's warning. She thought of Lila's weak cough in the night. She thought of the fear in her daughter's eyes when she asked if she was bad. Mara made a choice, not because she wanted luxury, because she wanted a chance to keep her child. That was why she walked to the mansion that night. And that was why, after the door opened and Julian Cross looked down at her, she forced herself to hold his gaze. Her heart was pounding, but her mind was clear now. She knew exactly what she needed to ask, and she had to find the courage to say it out loud. Julian Cross had built his life on control. From the outside, his world looked flawless. He lived in a gated estate on a quiet hill, far from traffic and noise. His mornings began with clean schedules, filtered sunlight, and assistants who spoke softly and never surprised him. His company controlled several major tech logistics systems across 3 continents. People wrote articles about his vision and discipline. Investors trusted him. Employees feared disappointing him. Julian was 42 years old, fit, well-groomed, and respected, and deeply alone. The mansion where Maris stood had more rooms than Julian used. He slept in one bedroom, ate in one dining area, worked in a home office that faced a garden he rarely walked through. The rest of the space stayed quiet like a museum no one visited. Julian had once believed success would feel louder. He remembered being a young man in a shared apartment eating cheap noodles working through the night. Back then, he felt alive. Tired, but alive. He had believed that when he finally made it, something inside him would settle, that the pressure would ease. Instead, the pressure only changed shape. Money solved problems, but it did not answer questions. Julian had not always been this empty. There was a time when his life included warmth, laughter, noise that wasn't scheduled. Her name had been Elena. Elena had been a school counselor. She believed in people in a way Julian never quite understood. She talked about children like they were puzzles worth solving, not problems to remove. She challenged Julian without fearing him. They met before the money became overwhelming. Elena used to tease him. "You don't listen," she would say, smiling. "You wait for your turn to talk." Julian would reply, "That's not true," and she would laugh. "See, you're doing it again." They were married for 6 years. The strain came slowly. Julian worked more, traveled more, missed dinners, missed anniversaries. He told himself it was temporary, just one more quarter, one more expansion. Elena stopped arguing at some point. That was when Julian should have been scared, but he was too busy. When she finally said she wanted a divorce, Julian felt more confused than angry. "I don't hate you," Elena told him, sitting across the table from him in their old apartment. "I just don't feel like I exist in your life anymore." Julian said nothing. He did not know how to argue with that. She left with quiet dignity. No scandals, no public fights, just absence. After that, Julian filled his life with work. He told himself he preferred it this way: cleaner, easier, no emotional mess. But sometimes late at night, he walked through his house and felt like a guest in his own life. He did not invite friends over. He did not host parties. The silence was something he controlled, and yet it pressed on him. That evening, Julian had been reviewing reports in his study. A glass of water sat untouched on his desk. The room was warm, safe. When the security alert chimed softly, Julian frowned. "Visitor at the gate?" he asked through the system. "Yes," the voice replied. "A woman. She appears homeless." Julian leaned back slightly. This was unusual. Security usually handled situations like this without bothering him. "Did she say why she's here?" he asked. "She requested to speak with you directly." Julian hesitated. For a brief moment, annoyance flickered. Then curiosity replaced it. Something about the way the word requested had been used caught his attention. "Let her in," he said. When the doorbell rang minutes later, Julian stood and walked to the entrance himself. He did not call staff. He did not send security. He opened the door and saw her. She was thinner than he expected, younger than he thought she would be. Her coat was old, her shoes worn down, but her eyes were sharp with urgency, not emptiness. When she apologized and said she needed to ask him something, Julian felt an unexpected pause inside himself. People usually asked him for things indirectly, through emails, through lawyers, through carefully prepared pitches. No one stood at his door with nothing but their voice. Julian noticed her hands shaking. He noticed how she stood straight anyway. When she finished speaking and fell silent, Julian did not answer right away. Something in her expression reminded him of Elena, Not the look itself, but the refusal to beg without reason. Julian felt something unfamiliar rise in his chest. Not pity, not guilt. Attention. He stepped slightly aside and said, "Come in." The words surprised him as much as they surprised her. As the door closed behind them, Julian realized he was about to hear a request that would not leave him unchanged. And he did not yet know whether he was ready for that. The warmth inside the house hit Mara first. It wrapped around her like a forgotten memory. Soft light, clean air, a faint smell of wood and something citrus. Her body reacted before her mind did. Her shoulders tensed like she didn't trust it to last. Julian noticed. "Would you like to sit?" he asked, not unkindly. Mara nodded once. She followed him into a sitting room near the entrance. The furniture was simple but perfect. Nothing out of place, nothing worn. She sat on the edge of the couch, afraid to lean back. Julian sat across from her, hands resting on his knees. He did not rush her. "You said you needed to ask me something," he said. "Take your time." Mara swallowed. Her mouth was dry. She pressed her palms together and stared at them for a moment, grounding herself. "My name is Mara," she said. "I'm homeless. I have a daughter. She's 7. Julian listened without interruption. "She's sick," Mara continued. "Not always, but enough that doctors say she needs stability. A real place, clean air, heat, follow-up care." Julian's jaw tightened slightly. Still, he said nothing. "I'm not here to ask for money," Mara said quickly, like she was afraid he would stop her. "Not for myself, not to walk away with." Julian raised his eyes. "Then what are you asking for?" Mara took a breath. This was the moment she had carried with her all the way up the hill. "I'm asking you to help me prove I'm not a bad mother," she said. The words came out softer than she expected. They hung in the air between them. Julian frowned. "Explain." Mara nodded. "Child Services is watching me. They say if I can't give my daughter a stable place, they might take her. Not because I hurt her, not because I don't love her, but because I'm poor, because I lost my home." Her voice shook now, but she kept going. "I'm asking you to help me with housing, not a gift, not charity I disappear with. I want a chance to work, to live somewhere safe for her, long enough to show the system I can stand on my own again." Julian leaned back slightly. "You could ask a shelter, or a program." "I did," Mara said. "For years, they're full, or temporary, or unsafe. I don't have time anymore." Julian studied her face. He saw fear there, but also anger and pride. "You came to me because," he asked. "Because you have influence," Mara said honestly, "and because you don't need anything from me." The room was quiet. Julian felt something shift inside him. This was not a request he could solve with a check and forget. This was not a problem that ended with a transfer. "You want me to get involved," he said slowly. "Yes," Mara replied. "I want you to stand as a reference, as proof. I want you to help create a path where I can work live and keep my child. Not because I'm lucky, but because I'm capable." Julian felt resistance rise. His instinct was to pull back. Involvement meant risk, scrutiny, questions. "You're asking me to put my name behind you," he said. "Yes." "Why should I?" Mara's eyes filled, but her voice did not break. "Because if you don't," she said, "my daughter may grow up believing she was unwanted or broken, and I can't let that be her story." Julian looked away for a moment. He saw Elena's face in his mind, the children she talked about, the ones who slipped through cracks because adults stayed distant. "You don't know me," Julian said. "I could say no." "I know," Mara said, "but I also know this: if you say no, you'll forget me. If you say yes, you won't." The words landed harder than she intended. Julian exhaled slowly. He realized something uncomfortable then. He had spent years avoiding responsibility that didn't benefit him directly, avoiding mess, avoiding need. This request was not about money. It was about presence. "Where is your daughter now?" he asked. "With a friend from the clinic," Mara said. "Just for tonight." Julian stood and walked to the window. The garden lights glowed softly. Everything in his life was controlled, designed. He turned back to her. "I won't give you money to disappear," he said, "but I will help you build stability. I'll arrange temporary housing, legal support, employment placement, and I will personally speak to child services." Mara's breath caught, but Julian continued. "You will work. You will follow through. And this won't be quiet." Mara stood up. Tears spilled freely now. "I will," she said. "I swear I will." Julian nodded once. The decision settled in him heavy and clear. "This starts tomorrow," he said. And with that, both of them understood something had changed, not because of kindness, but because of a request that demanded courage from them both. The change did not arrive like a miracle. It came slowly in steps that were careful and exhausting. The next morning, Julian kept his word. Mara sat at the edge of a chair in a small office building downtown holding a folder with her name printed neatly on the front. Julian had arranged temporary housing in a clean, modest apartment near a clinic. It was not luxurious. It was not hidden. It was real. A place with heat, a working kitchen, and a bedroom where Lila could sleep without coughing through the night. When Mara opened the door to that apartment for the first time, she did not step inside right away. She stood in the doorway and stared. Lila tugged at her hand. "Mom? Is this ours?" Mara dropped to her knees and hugged her daughter so tightly that Lila laughed and squeaked. "Yes," Mara whispered. "For now, it's ours." Julian did not stay long that day. He introduced Mara to a case manager, a legal advisor, and an employment counselor. He spoke clearly without softness or pride. "She will follow through," he said. "I'll make sure of it." Mara felt both supported and exposed. There was no room to fail quietly now. The first weeks were overwhelming. Mara woke up before dawn every day. She made breakfast for Lila. She walked her to school, holding her hand the entire way like she was afraid someone would take her if she let go. Then she rushed to training sessions, interviews, and paperwork appointments. She learned quickly that stability was hard work. Some days she came home so tired her legs shook, but she cooked anyway. She helped Lila with homework. She read her a story before bed, even when her eyes burned with exhaustion. Lila changed too. Her cough faded. Her cheeks filled out. She smiled more easily. She started talking about school friends and drawing pictures of our house with bright windows and flowers that looked like stars. One night, Lila asked Mom, "Are we safe now?" Mara paused. She chose her words carefully. "We're safer," she said, "and we're working to stay that way." Julian visited occasionally, not often, not intrusively. He checked in through updates and brief meetings. When he did come by, he kept his distance, standing near the doorway, observing more than speaking. Mara noticed that he never treated her like a project. He asked her opinions. He listened when she spoke. He did not soften his expectations. When Mara was late to a meeting once because of a transportation problem, Julian did not rescue her. He said, "What's your plan to prevent this next time?" She flushed with embarrassment but answered honestly, and she fixed it. Slowly, trust grew, not as a feeling, but as a pattern. One evening, Julian stayed longer than usual. Lila was drawing at the kitchen table. She looked up at him and asked, "Are you rich?" Julian blinked, caught off guard. Mara rushed to apologize, but Julian raised a hand. "I suppose I am," he said. Lila thought about this. "Do you have kids?" "No," Julian replied. Lila nodded seriously. "You should. They make things better." Julian laughed a real laugh, sharp and surprised. Mara froze at the sound. She had not heard that from him before. After that night, something softened between them. Not romance, not yet. Understanding. Julian began involving Mara in discussions beyond her own case. He asked her about gaps she saw in the system. What worked? What didn't? where people fell through. At first, Mara was hesitant. "I'm not an expert," she said. "You're living it," Julian replied. "That counts." She spoke carefully, then more confidently. She talked about waiting lists that led nowhere, about rules that punish people for being unstable instead of helping them become stable, about how shame kept people silent. Julian listened. He started attending meetings differently, asking harder questions, pushing for accountability, and people noticed. Not everyone approved. At Julian's company, whispers began. "She's influencing him. Why is he spending time on this? Is this personal?" One afternoon, Julian's chief advisor, Marcus Hale, requested a private meeting. Marcus was polished, sharp, and deeply invested in Julian's public image. "This involvement concerns me," Marcus said carefully. "Your reputation depends on clarity." "Boundaries." Julian folded his arms. "Be specific." "This woman," Marcus said, "she's becoming visible. People are connecting her to you." Julian said nothing. Marcus continued. "Charity is one thing. Attachment is another. If this turns messy, it could affect investors. Boards don't like unpredictability." Julian's expression hardened. "She asked me for help," Julian said. "Not secrecy." Marcus sighed. "I'm advising you to step back." Julian shook his head once. "I won't." Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly. "Then be prepared for consequences." Julian was. Mara felt the shift before she understood it. Appointments became tense. Some staff were colder. Questions were sharper. She heard her name whispered in hallways. One day a social worker asked, "Do you feel pressure to perform because of who's backing you?" Mara answered calmly, "I feel pressure because my child's future depends on it." Still doubt lingered. Mara began to worry she was becoming a symbol instead of a person. One evening after a particularly hard day, she sat on the apartment floor while Lila slept and cried quietly into her hands. She felt the old fear creeping back, the fear of losing everything again. Julian called unexpectedly. "You sound tired," he said. "I am," Mara admitted. "Do you regret asking me?" he asked. She thought about it. "No," she said. "But I'm scared." "So am I," Julian replied. The honesty surprised them both. Their connection deepened, not through comfort, but through shared risk. But somewhere behind the scenes, opposition was growing. Files were being reviewed, questions raised, stories reshaped. And as Mara stood stronger each day, someone else was preparing to pull the ground from under her feet. When someone without power begins to stand tall who feels threatened first, the trouble did not arrive loudly. It came in emails and closed-door meetings in careful language that sounded professional, but carried sharp intent. Mara first sensed it during a routine review with Child Services. The caseworker, a woman named Renee, flipped through Mara's file more slowly than usual. Her tone was polite but distant. "There have been concerns raised," Renee said. Mara's chest tightened. "Concerns about what? About influence," Renee replied. "About whether your progress is sustainable without external pressure." Mara understood immediately what that meant. "You think I'm being carried," she said quietly. Renee did not deny it. "Some believe your situation has been managed." Mara's hands clenched in her lap. "Managed doesn't mean fake. I'm doing the work." Renee nodded. "That's not the question. The question is what happens when the support steps away." Mara left the office shaking. That same week, Julian received a call from Marcus Hale. "Board members are asking questions," Marcus said. "Media interest is growing. Someone leaked details about your involvement." Julian's voice was calm. "Leaked by whom?" Marcus did not answer directly. "This is spiraling. We need to contain it." Julian felt anger rise. Contain what? A woman trying to keep her child? "Perception," Marcus said sharply. "Perception is reality at your level." Julian ended the call without agreeing to anything. 2 days later, a short article appeared online. It did not name Mara directly. It did not accuse Julian of wrongdoing. It simply suggested ethical concerns about a billionaire personally influencing family welfare cases. The comments were worse. This is favoritism. If she wasn't connected, she'd be nowhere. Why does one woman get special treatment? Mara read them late at night, her hands shaking as she scrolled. Mom Lila asked from the doorway. Are we in trouble again? Mara closed the screen and forced a smile. No, sweetheart, go back to bed. But the fear was back. Stronger this time because now it had a voice. The next meeting with child services was brutal. A supervisor joined. Papers were spread across the table. Questions came fast and cold. Can you maintain employment without Mr. Cross's involvement? What happens if housing support ends? Are you emotionally dependent on this arrangement? Mara answered honestly. She did not exaggerate. She did not beg. I am capable, she said. I'm not asking to be carried forever. I'm asking not to be punished for getting help. The supervisor closed the folder. We'll be reviewing custody options. The words hit like a physical blow. Mara left the building barely able to breathe. She went straight to Julian's office. Security hesitated, but Julian had already been alerted. He came down himself. Mara, he said, seeing her face. What happened? They're trying to take her, Mara said. Her voice broke. They're saying I'm only stable because of you. Julian felt something snap inside him. He knew then that staying quiet was no longer an option. The next day, Julian requested a formal hearing. Not private, not negotiated quietly, public. Marcus confronted him in his office. This is reckless. No, Julian replied. This is honest. You're risking everything. Julian looked at him steadily. So is she. The difference is I can afford to. The hearing drew attention. Media showed up. Advocacy groups listened. Professionals filled the room. Mara sat at the table, hands folded back straight. Lila was with a trusted teacher nearby. When it was Julian's turn to speak, the room quieted. I was asked for help, he said clearly. Not money, accountability, oversight, structure. I gave those things, not to replace effort, but to allow it. He looked directly at the panel. If we punish people for receiving support, we ensure failure. If we remove children from loving parents because stability came with assistance, we misunderstand the purpose of the system. The room was silent. Then Mara spoke. She did not cry. She did not plead. I didn't ask him to save me, she said. I asked him to see me, to stand with me while I proved I could stand alone. The decision came days later. Custody remained with Mara. The supervisor who pushed for removal was reassigned. The review process changed. Policies were questioned. The article that once criticized Julian was replaced by another, this one about reform. Marcus resigned quietly. When Julian called Mara with the news, she sank onto the couch and laughed through tears. They didn't take her, she said. They didn't take her. Julian closed his eyes, relief flooding through him. The truth had won not because of power, but because someone had asked for the right thing. And both of their lives were no longer moving backward. They were moving forward together. The weeks after the decision felt different. Not lighter, just steadier. Mara woke each morning without the sharp fear that used to hit her chest before her eyes even opened. She still worked hard. She still worried. But the ground under her feet felt real now. She was promoted to a full-time position at the clinic where she had been training. The pay was modest but stable. She signed her name on a longer lease for the apartment. When the pen touched the paper, her hands shook again, but this time it was from relief. Lila flourished. She joined an after-school art program. She brought home drawings of houses with gardens of stick figures holding hands. One picture showed 3 people, her Mara and Julian. Lila had labeled him Mom's friend. Mara stared at the drawing for a long time before placing it carefully on the fridge. Julian changed too. Not suddenly, not loudly. He started leaving the office earlier. He took walks in the garden he had ignored for years. He listened more in meetings. When people spoke about risk, he asked risk to whom he no longer measured his days only by numbers. One evening, Julian invited Mara and Lila to dinner at the house, not as a meeting, not as a favor, as guests. Mara hesitated at first. Old instincts told her not to cross invisible lines, but Julian was clear. "I'd like you both to come," he said. No agenda. Dinner was simple. Pasta, salad. Lila talked about school nonstop. Julian listened like every detail mattered. Afterward, while Lila watched a movie in the next room, Julian and Mara stood by the kitchen counter. "I didn't know my life could be this quiet," in a good way, Julian said. Mara nodded. "I didn't know safety could feel this strange." They laughed softly. There was no rush between them, no dramatic confessions, just shared understanding. Over time, affection grew in small gestures. A hand resting on the back of a chair. A look held a second longer than necessary. Comfort without pressure. Julian never tried to save Mara. He respected her independence. Mara never leaned on him as a solution. She trusted herself. That balance mattered. One afternoon, Julian attended Lila's school art show. He stood awkwardly among other parents, unsure where to place his hands. Lila ran to him and said, "You came, yes." Julian replied, "I said I would." Mara watched from across the room, something warm spreading in her chest. Later that night, Julian walked them home. The street was quiet, ordinary. "This," Julian said, gesturing gently around them, "feels more real than anything I've built." Mara looked at him. "You built this too. You just didn't do it alone." Julian stopped walking. "Mara," he said carefully, "I don't know what the future looks like, but I know I don't want to step away from this." Mara felt her heart race, but she did not run from it. "Then don't," she said simply. They stood there under a streetlight, not as rescuer and rescued, not as billionaire and homeless woman, but as two people who had chosen to show up when it mattered. And that choice had changed everything. Life did not turn into a fairy tale. It turned into something better. Mara still woke early. She still packed lunches, checked homework, and rushed through busy days. But now when she came home, she unlocked a door that was hers. She paid the bills herself. She earned her place. The fear of losing everything no longer ruled her thoughts. Julian became part of their routine, slowly, naturally. Some mornings he walked Lila to school with Mara. Some evenings he cooked dinner and burned the garlic bread. On weekends they visited parks, museums, and ordinary places Julian had never had time for before. The mansion no longer felt like a wall between worlds. It became just another place they visited, not a symbol of power, but a space where conversations happened and laughter echoed. What shaped their new life most was not money or status. It was that moment at the door. Julian never forgot it. The knock. The woman who did not ask to be rescued, but to be trusted. That request changed how he saw responsibility, success in himself. Mara never forgot it either. The night she chose courage over shame. The night she asked someone powerful not for comfort, but for accountability. Years later, when people asked how Julian became known for reforming support systems, instead of just funding them, he always gave the same answer. "Someone knocked on my door," he said, and she asked the right question. Mara stood beside him at events, sometimes not as a symbol, but as a professional voice who understood both sides of the system. She spoke with calm strength, with dignity earned, not gifted. Lila grew up knowing she was never unwanted. She knew her mother fought for her. She knew help did not mean weakness. She knew one brave question could change a life. Sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is ask for help the right way. Not for escape, but for a fair chance. True change does not come from money alone, but from responsibility shared. When we choose to see people instead of judging them, systems improve and lives are restored. Courage is not loud, it is honest. And one honest request can rewrite the future. If this story moved you, please like the video. Share it with someone who believes second chances matter. Subscribe to the channel for more real stories about courage and change. And remember, sometimes the door that changes everything is the one you're brave enough to knock on.